Love that tune. Joey Cleveland bringing us into another episode of That's What G Said podcast. Well, this is an episode that will be coming out on August the 23rd. Recorded some of this episode on August the 22nd. So you'll hear an interview. Basically, the bulk of this episode will be an interview with Scott Shapiro, good friend from Bet America, from Twin Spires. You see Scott all over the place. Does a great job handicapping, and you'll hear everything with Scott. We talk a little bit of baseball at the beginning, but then we spend an hour going over the Saratoga card, the Travers card for Saturday, August the 24th. We hit on all of the Grade 1 races, and we tackle those, and then I'm going to recap a little bit afterwards with some of my selections one more time quickly, and then close things out with a little BH90210, Beverly Hills 90210, the great nostalgic corny show that week 1 ratings were awesome. Last couple weeks the ratings have not been as good. It's kind of strange to me because I think the show is what it is, right? I think a lot of people watched it and said, it's not very good. And I will say that the first part of the first episode was probably the weakest of the 3 episodes. And now I think, just like a lot of shows, it's take a little while to get into the groove. Unfortunately, if the ratings don't turn back up, they might not be more, they might not have more than their short little 6-episode comeback season that this was. So 3 more to go, but we'll talk about episode 3 of BH90210. But first up, let's get into the current status of our Best Wrestling Movies tournament. Down to the final 4. The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke, the newer version, and Nacho Libre. The Wrestler right now is crushing Nacho Libre. And then in the other, it's Vision Quest versus Man on the Moon. So those were their final 4. Vision Quest has the lead slightly over Man on the Moon. My personal favorite was Vision Quest. My dad, wrestling coach, wrestled growing up. I wrestled growing up too, from about age 5 to 14 or so. When I went to high school, they didn't have wrestling. I played soccer, but my dad wrestled, coached, and so whenever he would have a meeting at the start of the season, he'd always show the movie Vision Quest to his team, and I love the movie. It not only is it a great wrestling movie, it's just a great movie overall. Good soundtrack. If you've never seen the movie Vision Quest, or if you haven't watched it in a while, go check it out again. Great flick. Not a bad final 4 for the wrestling movies. Nacho Libre's fun. The Wrestler is really good. Vision Quest is really good. And the Man on the Moon is a really good movie too. I was getting some guff because a couple people said, it's not really a wrestling movie. I said, yeah, but there's a lot of wrestling in it, and I'm pretty much deciding on this, so I don't get to vote. I'm at least going to get to put the movies in. So I think next up might be boxing. So far, if you have not been paying attention, or maybe you missed, you can go back through the past episodes and listen in, or go back through some of my tweets. It's me, Gino B, and you can see the previous polls. We've had best basketball movies, where Hoosiers won. We've had best baseball movies, where Major League won. We've had best soccer movies, where Bend It Like Beckham won. We've had best golf movies, where Caddyshack won. Best hockey movies, where Slapshot won. And then the best animated Disney movies we had, where The Lion King won. So yeah, a couple more sports to hit. Football will be coming up soon. That'll be a big one. I think second behind baseball, football will be probably one of the bigger and more wide open of the sports. There's some really good football movies out there, so look forward to that. Let's get into the interview with Scott Shapiro. Mentioned Scott from Twin Spires and Bet America. You can find him on Twitter. He does some really great work, and I follow him. And if you're ever looking to handicap a particular race, a game, a sport, he's very good. He knows football, college basketball, golf very well. Just overall very well rounded. Scott Shapiro at Scott Shap 34 on Twitter. Give him a follow. and listen in as we go through the Travers card at Saratoga. We're going to start in race number 5, and we'll go through the stakes races. So enjoy the conversation with Scott.
We got a big racing weekend coming up. It is the Travers Day over at Saratoga, and you know what that means. Not only is it just the big Travers, as you know, past years a big day would generally mean just 1 or 2 big races. That's not the case anymore when we have these massive supercar days. So I'm very, very excited to introduce a good friend of mine. And man, if you are in the racing world, you have seen this gentleman really skyrocket over the last few years. He's now an analyst for Bet America and for Twin Spires, and he covers more than just horse racing, really all wagering, NFL, NCAA basketball, golf in particular. He hosts a podcast, the Who Do You Like podcast, that you can download and subscribe to anywhere you get your podcast. I hear him in the mornings on Saturday and Sunday on the radio giving out plays. He is a jack of all trades, and everywhere you can find him on Twitter at Scott Shap34, Mr. Scott Shapiro. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Appreciate the kind words, Gino. Excited to join you for the first of hopefully many podcasts. I've really appreciated you joining me for a couple of ours, and I have to say our MLB picks have done pretty well.
They have. You know, I've been going through them back and forth. It looked like a couple teams that we were high on, like the Twins. They had a little bit of a lull, but they never really played poorly. It was more the Indians starting to play really well. The Cardinals have started to play some good ball, and the Cubs, who we were cold on, kind of came back to life a little bit. And so I felt better about that. So that, because I didn't want to give like Krista Feck any more opportunity to rip me. So yeah, things have started to take shape very nicely, and I'll never complain. I'll knock on wood when the Dodgers are having such a good year, and just cross my fingers and hope they can get back to the World Series again.
It seems like it's they're either going to win the World Series this year or they're not going to make it. I mean, they can't make it and lose again, can they? I mean, you know, it's
the only thing, like when I totally take my fan hat off and just kind of look back at the last couple of years and as an analyst, the only thing I look at is I say, well, they lost to 2 really good teams in the World Series. I still don't look at them in the last couple of years and go, well, that was a series that they probably should have won. Even against the Astros, that was a real good Game 7, gone back and forth. They had opportunities to win and put them away earlier. The Astros kind of did too. It was just a really good series. And then last year, they were just a step behind Boston. They were just. It was one of those years for Boston where everything went well, and it's amazing to see how well things went for Boston last year compared to this year, where they don't have, you know, an entirely different team at all. They have a lot of the same players that were really good last year. Their offense is still as good, but you look at the Red Sox and they just haven't been able to be as good in those situational spots that they were all throughout the year last year in big moments.
Yes, and that's what makes it as impressive as anything about the Dodgers is that they've been able to lose in the championship, which if you look over a lot of sports, not just baseball specifically, usually means a letdown. And the good thing about baseball and the Dodgers is you can probably come out of the gates a little slow like they did last year, not this year, and you got plenty of time to make up for it and peak at the right time. But yeah, I mean, the Red Sox bullpen got beat up a little. They lost some of those guys. But yeah, just in general, it's difficult to get up for a season and be as good as they were and come back and do it again. But yeah, they certainly have underachieved, as we thought they would, though. I got that Yankees division bet, you know.
We did. We knew the Yankees. And it looked like the Yankees were just really built to be a really good regular season team, you know, and they did this year with all those injuries. So
unreal.
I'm excited because there was a lull in the middle of the season where you started to look and to be honest, this was, I never want to say like an easy season to predict, but a lot of the things on paper in baseball, there were a couple things, but a lot of the teams that didn't look like they were going to be good aren't good. Right, we didn't have very many surprises. Some of those bottom feeder teams that we thought everyone would be able to beat up on kind of have been those teams. So, you know, in the middle of the season, I don't want to say it was boring, but it started to look very like formful. And then the last couple of weeks now, some teams started really playing well. A couple of these wild card races picked up, and after the trade deadline, a few moves were made. So now when you look at the American League, you have, you know, the Yankees are a strong team. The Astros are a strong team. It looks like the Indians and the Twins are both strong teams, and the Rays are strong. I feel like that's going to be a good, you know, American League playoffs. And even in the National League, where the Dodgers have been kind of the class throughout most of the year, The Braves made a couple moves. They just took 2 out of 3 from the Dodgers in a series over the weekend. The Central, we like the Cardinals. They're as talented to beat anyone in a series. I would never be shocked to see the Cubs beat any team in a series. So I look at the National League too now. I feel like we're going to get a playoff in baseball where we're going to have maybe 6 or 7 pretty good teams.
Yeah, it should be fun. Always look forward to the baseball playoffs. They used to be a little more unpredictable than they have been of late.
Yes.
We'll see if we get back to that, or maybe some of these top teams are just better, and it ends up being good for the World Series when we get the clash of the Titans.
Okay, let's get to the horse racing talk, which I'm sure most people are tuned in for. We're going to go through all the grade ones on Saturday, August the 24th. So get your past performances out right now, and we will begin with race number 5. What's cool about this card, Scott, is you have a lot of big name horses, a lot of horses that people will recognize because they've been top of their divisions for the last 6 months, year, 2 years. But I don't look through the races, and even in the races where there might be a heavy favorite, it feels like they're not just free spaces throughout. I feel like these races are actually still competitive, even in the smaller fields that might have some shorter prices. You look at this race to start, the Forgo, where Matoli, you can't really knock what this guy's done. He was super impressive. He had a 7-race win streak that was snapped last time out. Although I will just say this for the people who are going to get upset. He wasn't going to beat McKenzie in the Met Mile if McKenzie didn't have that trouble, but I know that's going to frustrate a few people out there. Nonetheless, he's an awesome horse. He's had a great year. He's one of the best horses in training. When you talk about from 6 furlongs to a mile, he's excellent. And I think, we looked at his last race. He just drew the rail. He got dueled into submission by Strike Power. We saw Imperial Hint freak in that race. I guess you have to start the analysis and the handicapping in this race with Matoli. And where do you lean on him in here?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, he certainly is a very nice horse, whether he would have beaten McKenzie or not. And the last effort in the Vanderbilt was forgivable, in my opinion, not only because he wasn't going to – very few sprinters ever would have beaten Imperial Hint that day. But the fact that he drew the rail right inside of another speedball and Strike Power, like you mentioned, made it – on paper look like, even though he was 1-2, that if things shook out a certain way, he would struggle or have to work really hard. And in this spot, he comes in second off the freshening for Steve Asmussen, and a couple encouraging things. One, we talked to Steve Asmussen on Inside Churchill Downs right before the Vanderbilt, and I didn't get any sense that if he ran well in the Vanderbilt that they had any designs on coming back for the Forgo. So the fact that he didn't run well, yet they still bring him back in this race, that's kind of encouraging to me. I think they would have given him a little more time off after the Vanderbilt if they thought something went wrong or they thought he wasn't doing extremely well. But now they're bringing him back, and he does draw outside as opposed to inside. That's
the key,
speed.
Right?
Yep. And that's the key, like you said. Promises Field, a very fast horse. We saw these two face off twice already. The more similar race was the Churchill Downs on Derby Day, where Promises Fulfilled drew inside Matoli that day, and Matoli was able to rate for the first time against a strong field and pull away in the end. And it looks like, unless maybe Kildebeg's captain, who draws outside Matoli, decides to mix it up 3 deep, that Matoli should be able to sit right off of Promises Fulfilled and get the best of this group, assuming he doesn't take another step backwards.
Yeah, that's really what I saw when I looked on paper too, because you saw Promises Fulfilled and Matoli hook up a couple times, and Promises Fulfilled is no slouch. Every time I watch his races, I continue to get more and more impressed with him. Even the race like the Met, where he didn't get the lead, and he was just kind of in between, kind of pressing. And then at the top of the lane, he looked like he was done, and he actually held on pretty well to finish 4th that day. Like, if you watch the race again, when he starts to look like he's tired, you're thinking, okay, he's going to back up. He actually holds strong and actually holds off Firenze Fire, which he's the horse I never know what to do with, Firenze Fire, because one of these, in a spot like this, he's going to jump up and win one of these times when he gets the trip. The problem is, he seems like in the last 2 starts, he should have been a little bit better. I think I'm willing to forgive the Vanderbilt race when he started to move, and then he kind of moved down into a dead rail, and then you could see that rail was not the place to be that day, and then he just immediately stopped. And he was never even able to go by Matoli, who I actually think ran pretty well in that Vanderbilt to hold off Firenze Fire. So every time he's in a spot like this, like, if you look at this race, and if you're going to try to beat Promises Fulfilled and Matoli, or just look for a little bit more of a price, you're probably thinking it's Firenze Fire, because he looks again like, okay, as you mentioned, if Killebeg's captain puts a little speed on Promises Fulfilled, or let's say Matoli doesn't really want to sit, and maybe the three of them hook up, or even just two of the three of them hook up, then it does look like Firenze Fire who gets the trip, who gets the jump. I just don't know if he's quite good enough. I mean, he should have every opportunity again in a small field like this. He's a tough horse for me to kind of to figure out. And I just wanted to mention Airstrike a little bit, who I don't think is the quality. He'll be a horse who is the same type of thing. He needs a little pace to set up, but he does come out of some productive races, even though they're still a cut below these sprinters. I think they're not quite at the Matoli Imperial Hint level. He did lose to Sistron, who then just came back and won the Bing Crosby, so he was beat by Sistron a couple times in a row. Mosito Rojo, that's a 15-time winner who's won 3 in a row, so he's no slouch. I just think he's more of a cut below. So for you, is this really just kind of a Matoli and move on?
Yeah, I feel similar about Firenze Fire, a tough horse to read. I think I'm willing to let him beat me, even though he'll get the trip. And I do think I am a little bit intrigued by Airstrike, maybe for second in this spot underneath. Promises Fulfilled would need to be dueled into defeat probably, or else they're going to probably 1-1-3-3-1 the way I see it.
Yeah, he's
but
tough, man. He holds.
He's
like,
a tough horse.
He really does. Like, he's not just a speed horse who doesn't hold. Even in Dubai, when he's not able to get the lead, he doesn't really pass horses, but he holds his ground really well. And
he's a good horse, man.
So you know what you're going to get from him, especially from the rail. They're just going to fly, and they're just going to, maybe try to get a little bit of separation from Matoli if they can. But nonetheless, I think Matoli's going to at least have to work. This isn't going to be a race where he's going to be able to just go very easy on the front end and cruise around. He's going to have to either press or sit off a really nice horse, and then hold off a couple decent horses at the very least in Firenze Fire and Airstrike.
Yeah, I agree, and it's definitely a stretch based on numbers to put Airstrike in second. But I do like the fact he's getting an extra furlong and goes second off the layoff. And I really like the way Joel Rosario should fit this horse. Horse from well off the pace. We know Joel can finish as well as anybody. So, and it's interesting that they opted to run in the Forgo as opposed to the Pat O'Brien. I'm not sure what the decision was there, but anyway, I do think I'll probably play a small 3-2 and probably single Matoli in the horizontal wagers.
That is in race number 5, which is the Grade 1 Forgo. The 6th race is the Grade 1 Ballerina, 7 furlongs. These are the fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. And what's interesting about this race is the horse who's the morning line favorite, Come Dancing, who is just a short favorite on the morning line. I still keep scratching my head and look back at that race when she was favored over Midnight Bisou in the Phipps, because on paper, she was coming off of 2 really big wins, and she looked like she was the lone speed in that race. And you know what? She actually didn't run poorly when she was second behind Midnight Bisou. She stumbled at the start. She was able to recover and get the length lead easily. She was just no match for Midnight Bisou, who not really many have been a match for her so far this year. The race in April was not bad. The only thing I looked back at that April 5th race in the Distaff when she was 4-1, and that was kind of the big race that started her 2-race win streak, or her really good 3 races in a row. She was able to get to the lead easily that day because the favorite, Catherine the Wise, stumbled, and that really opened things up for her early on. Now that one, Catherine the Wise, came back to win a $200,000 New York Bred Stakes next out. So I look at this race, and while Come Dancing has a lot of speed and is tough, do you feel like she's a single or an unbeatable horse in this spot?
No, and I have a lot of respect for what Carlos Martin has been able to do with this mare, and she certainly merits major respect. But my biggest question is, what kind of trip, for a 7-5 shot, what kind of trip is this horse going to be able to work out from the inside? I mean, she is a speed horse. She's not the fastest in the field. There's actually true sprinter types. Minute to Stardom, I think, is the true speed of this race. That the question on that horse might be the 7 furlongs, but can Javier Castellano work out a trip from off the pace, and will Come Dancing be able to get the best of other horses from off the pace and hold off any others from behind? To me, That's a greater than 7-5 chance, I guess, if you want to simplify things. I'm going to probably take a chance against Come Dancing. I guess this isn't really involved in any of the pick 5 sequences, but if she's going to be 7-5, it's not that I don't think she can win, but I just have a hard time visualizing her getting the trip.
Yeah, like how she wins. That's the thing. If she's impressive enough to kind of shrug off the other speed, because even to her outside, like Pacific Gale is like a presser, but she doesn't really pass, so she's going to be like shoved out of the gate a little bit early on. Mia Mischief is really quick, and she's going to show up right there on the outside and press. You mentioned Minute to Stardom might be the fastest in here, so now you're looking at this race, and I think what makes it tough on Come Dancing, the 5 fastest horses in this race all draw right next to each other in the middle of the field, and she's on the inside of all 5 of them.
Yep.
So that's where she might be in some trouble.
Yes, and I agree. And the other thing to keep in mind is Mia Mischief tried to relax off Minute to Stardom last time and clearly did not work.
No.
So you would have to assume Ricardo Santana Jr. and Steve Asmussen are planning on being a little more aggressive and not reliving the honorable miss where Minute to Stardom beat them to the lead, and they probably thought, this horse is 20-1, we can sit off and pass, and that just simply wasn't the case. So yeah, I think Come Dancing makes sense to play against. It's a horse that certainly has enough quality to beat me, beat you, beat anyone. But at the price and at the trip I'm expecting as a trip handicapper, I definitely can see a reason to take a chance against.
Yeah, even you look at the rest of the field, like there's just not a lot. I think there's 1 or 2 that are generally happy taking back a little bit. Even the one Special Relativity is not nearly as fast as the rest of these, but I don't think she wants to be like 5 lengths out of it. That's why for like a long shot chance, I give Dawn the Destroyer a look in here to pick up the pieces. I don't know how good this mare is, and I don't know if she can win. And it's not, like we said, it's not like a pick 5 race, so this might be a race where maybe I play a try and try to get her in the mix. If you look at her last few races, she hooked Lone Speed in her last 3. She was behind Come Dancing when Come Dancing was walking on the front end. She was behind Heaven Has My Nikki, who won that race just cruising on the front end. And she was behind Separation of Powers, who won on the front end last time out. And now with a couple of those horses hooking up, I think at the very least she'll get the trip. Who knows if she's good enough. So if we're going to go against Come Dancing, who do you like in this spot?
Yeah, I think if you're going to play against her from a horizontal perspective, I would use Special Relativity. Separation of Powers is a tough read for me. This horse went to the lead without a lot of speed in that last race. At Better Roses just popped the gate from the outside, but I don't think this horse will have any thoughts of going to the lead with the speed in this group. So she could be dangerous. She's run her best races at Saratoga. Never was a tremendous fan of this horse for a barn that's loaded with horses that I am, but she certainly could get the trip. And then your horse, Dawn the Destroyer, it remains to be seen how good she is at this point in her career. She's won 2 of 8 since the start of 2018, but one of those came at Saratoga. And like you mentioned, she's raced against the flow in the last 3. Sure, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more late in those races. So maybe she's just kind of a plotter at this point. But at 15-1, I'm willing to include in a horizontal environment. And same with Minute to Stardom. I don't think 7 furlongs is the game, but on the lead at that price with a number of horses that may not like to sit chasing, I think I would include. But overall, I guess the plan would be to try to beat the favorites in this race. I wish I had someone I liked a little more than I do on the outsiders.
And I kind of like what your approach is, because I don't want to take some of these horses who might be out of their best game. As you mentioned, like Mia Mischief, she wants to be pressing right off, and she's good if she's able to do that, but I don't know if she's going to be able to do that in here. Minute to Stardom's good when she's able to clear, and that's why I wouldn't even really talk you off that Special Relativity who you use from the inside, who's an obvious horse for course and loves Saratoga. And you know what? She's coming out of some good races too, for the same as the Dawn the Destroyer, who I like. Maybe she's not the top quality with Come Dancing or Separation of Powers or Mia Mischief when they run their A game, but from a trip standpoint, from a sharp standpoint, I think the inside and the outside both have at least a puncher's chance in here. So we'll give those horses a look, Special Relativity and Dawn the Destroyer. But I think I'm with you too. Of the short price horses, I would prefer Separation of Powers, because I feel like she might be able to maybe sit just off if Come Dancing, if Mia Mischief, if Minute to Stardom do hook up. Maybe she's just right behind that flight, and maybe she flops right into the win. So that's race number 6 in the Ballerina as we move on to the Jerkins. And Scott, we saw Chancelot run the highest buyer speed figure of any horse this year. Now, when I'm doing my handicapping, I'm generally not a person who just looks at the highest last out buyer and says, oh yeah, this is the winner. But when you run the highest buyer of any horse this year, that's probably something to stop and take note. Now, some knocks on this horse. He's going to have to stretch back out to 7 furlongs. He does draw the rail. And while there isn't maybe a ton of other early speed that's going to press him, there are some legitimate late runners in here who, if he does, stumble, or if he doesn't go smooth early on, a few of these may be able to pick him up late. But man, oh man, this horse was super impressive. I think I was on a flight, and I was listening to you talk on one of your podcasts about Chancelot and how, Navarro had talked about how this was the best horse he's ever trained. And he said that before the Amsterdam. And this is a gentleman who's trained some pretty good horses, including XY Jet. So this isn't like the first good horse he's ever had. He was just incredibly impressive last time out.
Yeah, and that Amsterdam, that 12-horse field, maybe in hindsight won't look as good now, but it looked like a loaded field in there,
Yeah.
And I never thought there would be a 6-5 shot, let alone a horse run his own race and kind of just, he laughed at that field. You rarely see efforts like that in a 12-horse field. And you mentioned the rail, and I want to think, as a horse player, guys like us that play right now, we want to find reasons to try to beat horses like Chancelot, because that's when you can really capitalize in race, horizontals, verticals, whatever it may be. But I don't see this horse is going to have to take a huge step backwards or miss the break from the inside. And his last 2 starts, he's first out of the gate. He didn't even give him a chance last
50
time.
yards.
Think about it.
50 yards, he would open up by a length. And then what I thought was really impressive, right? So he opens up a length from the outside. He's trying to cross over. And then a long shot named Classy John, who's like 50-1, he kind of gets shotgunned to try to push Chancelot a little bit. And he gets to about like Chancelot's butt. And then he just immediately shrugs this horse off, opens back up 2 lengths, like a couple kids out racing, and like your little brother kind of comes up to you and you're like, get out of here, and he just
was like,
and that was
like
it.
American Pharaoh in the Belmont. What was that? Materiality? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, where you're like, here comes material. Oh, there goes material.
Yeah. Thank God. He was cruising. He was very impressive. And, when you go back to the races prior to the Amsterdam, so if people are going to say, well, he didn't really beat anybody in that Amsterdam. Okay, well, he won by 12 plus lengths. 2, in his debut race, he beat a couple next out winners who came back to win maiden special weight races. One of them a state bred, and then another one an open. And then in career start number 2, he beat 2 next out winners. One of them came back to win a small Jersey Short Stakes at Monmouth. So it wasn't like he was coming out of bad races before he won the Amsterdam. And then I think one of the more interesting things is, right, like if you look up at the horse Nitrous, who very nice horse. This is a multiple graded stakes placed horse. He's multiple grade 1 placed. He just missed in the Woody Stevens. He basically ran the same exact race in the Woody Stevens and the Amsterdam, just from like a figure standpoint. Mm-hmm. And in one of the races, he was beaten a neck, and in the other one, he was beaten 12.5 lengths.
Yeah.
Like just using him as a measuring stick for Hog Creek Hustle versus Chancelot. Like that to me was so impressive when I looked at that. And like for the people that don't, understand the way that the figures and the numbers are made, like look at the difference between the 95 buyer and 121 buyer. That's a 12 length. There's like 12 lengths of difference in there. And that's just really impressive because I think, as you said, I'm looking at this field. I think, Baracho is a nice 3-year-old. I even think Dallas Stewart has a typical Dallas Stewart horse in here, right? Doesn't 12th Labor just look like a Dallas Stewart horse on paper? Like a late runner, like a late developing horse, maybe a cut below everyone who might just kind of sneak into the late, like the exotic somewhere. I have no knocks on Nitrous, no knocks on Mind Control, like Rowayton, Hog Creek Hustle. If there was more speed or if Chancelot wasn't in this race, I think all of them would have a chance to win. But if Chancelot breaks quick, and the only horse I think in this race that can even maybe push him is right to his outside, Like if Cole Paul is not intent on pushing him, the race is probably over early.
Yeah, and you have to think from Cole Paul and Irad Ortiz Jr. and Jason Service perspective, what's in it for them to really push this horse? I think if they just kind of let him cruise and sit second, they have a chance to run second.
Grade 1 placed.
Yeah, and they don't. And you look, they have a Grade 3 win. They finished third in the Champagne Grade 1, but they're looking for Grade 1 black type for sure. But he's the only thing that there is, and I guess. There are, like you mentioned, there are a couple horses I really like in this field. Baracho's a very nice horse that continues to improve for Rusty Arnold. And Rowayton, I think, cutting back to one turn is what he needs to do here. The Dwyer, he had the excuse and ran into Code of Honor, and the Curlin in the mud was just too much to ask. But loved that return race at Belmont at 6.5. And 12th Labor, just a 50-1 shot for Dallas Stewart. You mentioned this horse is way overclassed in many ways, but he definitely has shown the ability to run on late and is an improving sort. And when Dallas takes chances like this, and we love him for it because we would love more trainers to take chances and make these races more interesting. But he's a horse that I wouldn't be afraid to try to sneak into the exotics. But I wish I was more creative, Gino. Yeah. But it's just. I feel like I'd be wasting money trying to use horses other than Chance a lot.
I wish there was a little more speed. If we just had one or two, which generally in these 7 furlong 3-year-old races, in these sprint 3-year-old races, a lot of the horses that were not distance ones that wanted to get on in the big Triple Crown races, they end up cutting back and making this series, good and pretty fair. And a lot of times we get, like we saw in the Woody Stevens, a race that kind of falls apart, and Hog Creek Hustle and Nitrous come flying, and Baracho ran really well that day. He might have won. He had to kind of maneuver in and out and weave back and forth. So it's tough because I want to, like you two, we want to try to beat Chance a lot, but I just don't see where it shapes up for him. I think we mentioned the right horses, though. If you are trying to beat him, Baracho makes sense. I really wouldn't talk you off Nitrous. If Mind Control is over 10-1, his last start, he didn't get a good number or a good figure, but he literally had no chance. He was behind horses the entire race. Once he got out, he actually started to make a little bit of a move. So don't really let that race be the reason why you don't play him.
Or the one before.
Yeah. He got steadied, and that was an inquiry where I played Hog Creek Hustle, and I thought they were going to take him down because I'm going, oh no, this was like my best bet of the day. They're going to pull me down. I couldn't believe they left him up because Mind Control. Because, I watched the race, and at the top of the lane, like right when he gets impeded, Hog Creek Hustle comes along the outside and kind of crosses over on Mind Control a little bit. And it looked like Mind Control was backing up. And I watched 2 or 3 times after. It wasn't even that Mind Control was backing up. Hog Creek Hustle was just kind of moving a little faster because Mind Control didn't stop. He didn't stop, back up, and run dead last. He kind of kept grinding and kept trying. So, yeah, there are some quality. Mind Control's a Grade 1 winner. We're looking at Hog Creek Hustle, who's a Grade 1 winner, and we're just kind of shrugging them right off because Chancelot has really been that impressive. So, again, another race where we're going to see a big star, and we'll see if he can continue to shine and continue to improve Chancelot. I don't know how much you can improve off that 121 buyer, but we'll see. We'll see if he can take a step forward off of that one. We're gonna pass right through the Boston Spa, which. It's fine. I wouldn't want to spend a ton of time on this race anyways because you know what? I actually think in a race that will be kind of a formful race, if you can get 3-1 on Secret Message, I'll absolutely take it. I think she's a nice Grade 2 filly. She was behind Sister Charlie, Rushing Fall, and Home Reek, the 3 Chad Browns, who are 3 of Chad Brown's top tier. She doesn't really have to deal with any of the top tier, which is funny because that's kind of what happens in the next couple races. I felt like. In the grass races, at least, Scott, you look and you're like, oh, okay, well, Chad doesn't really have a top tier horse, but then you look out and he's got like Mashka there. And then when you get to the 10th race a little later on, you're like, oh yeah, Chad doesn't really have any of his top tier horses, but he does have Primo and Annals of Time, who are like major
I've never seen
players.
anything like it with this. He's just churns them out and it's crazy.
Well, and he also has a pretty live runner who, forgive me if I'm incorrect, but I think you and I both liked Wow Cat a little bit in the Breeders' Cup, right?
Yeah.
Was that a horse in the distaff that we both liked?
Yeah,
she ran
bad
really,
break
really well.
and almost ran down Monomoy Girl. Yep.
Yeah,
My binoculars almost got thrown on the ground that
I
day. I
think
was
you
so
talked with
mad.
us on the Mike Abadir show the week before the
Yeah,
Breeders' Cup, and we did a preview.
Wildcat and Shalom we talked about. It was
Those,
a tough
yep,
beat.
those
Tough
were a
one.
couple brutal ones who ran great races. Ugh,
Yeah,
brutal.
good
But
price.
this personal ensign, which we'll get to right now, which is the ninth race, this is by far the best of the older filly and mare races that we've seen on the year. We've seen Midnight Bisou and Elate hook up a couple times when they faced each other, and Midnight Bisou got the better of Elate. But now you throw Wildcat into the mix, and She's a Julie is no slouch, and then Golden Award is no slouch. So this is a small field, but if you told me Coach Rocks won, I'd be a little surprised. If you told me anyone else in this field run, I really wouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, I think. Looking at this field, obviously, the morning line suggests it could be a two-horse race to many with Midnight Bisou on the rail and Elate in the 4-hole. Of those two, I think I prefer Elate at anything a mile and an eighth or over. I thought she was extremely impressive in the mile and a quarter Delaware handicap last time, kind of made us realize that she's still here after the win in the Florida Lee, that it was workmanlike, but I think she's the clear horse to beat in here. But Wildcat to me once again is interesting. Second start off the layoff. I thought last time in the Shuvie against Golden Award and She's a Julie, she was kind of up against it when they went 50-1 and 113-4, giving Golden Award a huge edge. So she would be the third horse I'd consider. And if we're talking about horizontals type situation, I would probably just go 4 and 5 and let Midnight Bisou beat me like she has several times. I mean, she's had a great year. I never thought she would do this as a 4-year-old. And hats off to Steve Asmussen and my friend Jeff Bloom, who's been fortunate enough to be along on the ride with this one. But yeah, I think She's a Julie's a couple low, Gino. Not to talk anybody off at 12.
No.
But,
she seems like a pace. Like to me, when I look at this race, it looks like both Mott and Asmussen have a strong hand because I think they both have a pace horse, and then they both have the big mare and the big filly, Midnight Bisou and Elate. So She's a Julie and Golden Award. They hooked up last time out. Golden Award was just much better. She's actually nice. She's nice. She's actually done very little wrong in her career, and she's kind of improving at the right time. But I think you are right in that the top two are definitely a cut above the rest in here. Even Wildcat, who I like and who maybe can get trips and is a closer, and I think is better at a mile and an eighth probably than Midnight Bisou. The one thing I will give Midnight Bisou, I guess I'll give her a shot this year, going a little bit longer. Only because she just seems like she's, like you said, she's a better animal this year than she was last year. She's matured. She's a lot more push button. She's 5 for 5 on the year, but there are a couple really key knocks, as you mentioned. She's 0 for 3 at a mile and an eighth. She's 0 for 1 at a mile and a quarter. So she's not been good at anything over the mile and a 16th, and she's not really been great at Saratoga. So in her 2 races there. So were those because it was too long? Maybe she wasn't the quiet filly she is now. There are some knocks on a horse that is going to be a short price. So that's the concern. Are you going to want to take the really short price on her, or you have to worry about a few things? Now, I will say I don't really worry that her last race, like if you're just playing off it figures and stuff, that it was a little bit of a down race. Remember, that was the really weird Haskell day when they were off for a few hours, and then they ran that race at 6:27. It was just a bizarre card went with the heat, and they waited long. And so
weird day.
If you see numbers and figures from Haskell Day that are a little off, or horses' performances that might not have been quite up to the best, just kind of take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, Elate is just plain and simple. She's just been better going longer. She's just a mare that can run all day. Her big races have always been in these mile and an eighth, mile and a 16th, mile and an eighth, mile and a quarter races. It just seems like where she's her best, and that's going to be the real true test. And I hope we get the race where Midnight Bisou, who it feels like all year she's been on the rail. Like every one of her races, doesn't feel like she's kind of sitting on the rail, looms up, and then moves through, and she's on the rail again. So it'll probably be the same type of trip where she's sitting there waiting, and Elate moves up. I hope we get that race where we see these two hook up. And if it's not one of these two, you would prefer Wildcat?
Yeah, I think so, Gino. And I mean, I think if we're talking, if you handicap the race and you come up with Midnight Bisou and a late being standouts, I would recommend if unless you like a price in one of the other legs of your horizontals, pick one and don't use
Yes,
both. You see
absolutely.
people. It's the safe move to use them both. You're probably going to get through, but then you turn a 6-5, or I'm sensing that a late will be the favorite. I don't know. I mean,
I think so too. I think at the
yeah.
distance, and I think in New York, I think that has
Yeah, and I
something to do
just
with it
think
too.
And I just think in general, people are a bigger believer. Like a late is just a super horse that's kind
Hmm.
of underachieved at times, and people have kind of waited to beat Midnight Bisou over and over. At least a lot of the people I know.
Sure.
So not to take anything away from
No,
Midnight
no.
Bisou, but I do think a late will probably go off favorite. But
The
you know,
approach
the,
is right. You take
yeah,
you don't when you're playing a multi-race exotic like this, you almost never double up when you have two horses that are going to be very short, similar prices. It
you
just
just
doesn't make
kill your
sense.
value.
You
Yeah,
you
you
pick
just kill
one
your
of the two
value.
in single, or you use one in another horse. I mean, almost the only way I would ever do that is if I had like singled to really big prices, later in the card.
Exactly.
Because
That's the key. You got to think of what is around it. And I think, obviously with Chance a lot, if you're playing the pick five, you're already in a situation where if he wins and you don't structure your ticket right and it chalks out, you could lose money.
mhm,
And we all know these days can get chalky at times. So
yep.
you definitely don't
Just
want to
don't
hit
even put
five races
yourself in
for
that
a
situation. No,
Exactly.
you just don't even give yourself a chance for that to happen. You play the ticket. If you have an $80 budget and maybe you just like Elate, instead of playing an $80 ticket, you play maybe 40 and you double it up. You play it
Right.
twice, or if you want to go like you said, Elate and Wildcat, or maybe Elate and Golden Award, or Midnight Bisou and Golden Award. One of them and another price, so you give yourself an opportunity. I think too many times people will play tickets, and I used to see this a lot, and I would tell people, and I'm not saying it to be mean or anything, but it's like, well, that's an $81 ticket, and you might not get your 81. Like, things would have to go well for you to get your 81 back, you know.
Right.
And that's what the approach always has to be. Okay, don't feel forced to play a pick four or a pick five if you don't like it. Play an exacta, play a trifecta, play it one race at a time. Just don't feel forced to get into this. And then you have to go, okay, these are the two that are going to win this race. These are the two that are going to win this race. And then you look up, and in the entire sequence, you have A, B, A, B, A, C, A, B, C. It's just not, you're just not going to make money that way.
No, I totally agree. And on days like this, especially where there's relatively small fields and a number of horses that are going to be 2-1 or less that are very capable of winning, you have to be careful of constructing your wagers in the proper fashion, just as much or more than you do about handicapping the races.
Okay, 2 races to go. Let's get to race number 10. It is the Sword Dancer, the Grade 1 mile-and-a-half on the turf course. It's funny. You look when you start at this race. I looked 3 times to make sure the one proven reserves was in the right race, because you just never see that. It's like you just never see a Chad Brown horse like this running in a spot like this.
So
First
weird.
time on the turf. Maybe they're in there just in case the race gets taken off the grass, but it very, very strange, because he ran an awesome race first time out to win, going a mile on the dirt at Aqueduct. This horse has never tried the grass. Just so bizarre to see proven reserves in here. The 3 horses to the inside, I thought looked a little overmatched. Could you make a case for any of them sneaking into the exotics?
I can't.
No.
I always respect Mike Maker when he moves horses up in class. So of the 3, I would give Noble
Sure.
Thought the biggest chance. And it's funny you mentioned proven reserves because, like you said, Brown usually places his horses where maybe Klarovich just wanted to have a horse in the Sword Dancer, but it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
There's no turf pedigree. That when you mentioned at Aqueduct, when Chad's debuting his horses at Aqueduct, that's automatically a bit of a red flag. It was a 4-horse field.
He didn't even
But
get
most
bet.
he
Even
didn't get
favorite in
bet
that race.
exactly. But what's the weirdest thing is this horse doesn't have a lot of turf pedigree, but I wouldn't even care if the horse did, because Chad Brown debuts his turf horses on turf, or
Yes.
maybe a start or two. But for him to this to be the first start on turf. You know, it's
weird.
I wouldn't be surprised if this horse gets scratched. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to look. I mean, maybe they're going to send the horse because the Annals of Time is Klarovich. I forgot, so it's not even.
We're gonna find. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna find out there were like just a clerical error or something
Yeah,
this
it's weird. It's weird. Franco board. It's a weird situation. You almost wonder how this happened, but yeah, of the three inside horses, Noble thought would be the one that I would give a look, especially with a rod being on board. But it's a reach for any of those three to even hit the board.
And then after that, the race actually, I think of all of the races on the card, or maybe like the big ones, this one feels like the most wide open. It just doesn't feel like there's a dominant horse or two here. You know, Annals of Time looks good. He's very logical, very live, but he's not Chad's top tier horses. Maybe he will be, but he's not quite one of his A horses right now. Even Ya Primo, who was good, he showed up in a grade 2 in his first start, and he was behind Channel Cat. He moved up the rail. He got a good opening, and he could step forward.
Weird race.
It was a really weird race. I was, the more I watched the race, I was impressed with Channel Cat because he's not necessarily a horse who needs the lead. He's more of kind of a tactical speed horse, or kind of a pretty versatile horse who can adapt. But they asked him for speed. He clears off. He slows things down. And then at the top of the lane, he looks like he's done. The whole field comes back to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just keeps punching them off. Like he's fighting them off one at a time. A couple horses to his outside. Ya Primo ducks down to the inside. And he just keeps shrugging them all off. And, he's not a need the lead horse. Pletcher even said, I think they just took advantage of the pace that day. So if somebody else or one of the inside horses decide to go, he'll be completely fine with sitting. I think he's an exotics horse to include. There are many others in here. Who do you kind of look at, or maybe a couple of the horses that you're circling in on?
Well, I do think the Channel Maker, Channel Cat, the horses that come out of that Bowling Green, other than maybe Ya Primo, I've always considered those horses. They move up into the grade ones from time to time, but they're kind of a cut below the Chad, the best of the Chads.
Yeah.
So it was like last time was the time when there wasn't any of the Chad upper tier horses, as opposed to facing Bricks and Mortar or horses like Robert Bruce and horses like that. Annals of Time is a real tough read for me. This horse was really, really good in 2016. He came out to Del Mar for the Hollywood Derby. I remember that race vividly. What a tremendous closing kick that day, and was really expecting this horse to move on to bigger and better things, and then was on the bench for almost 2 years. Comes back, gets wired out by Guido, and then buried a field, but a field that is far and away lesser than this one. The horses that Devamani and came back last it was either the beginning of this week or the end of last week as a favorite again at Saratoga and failed again. So at that price, as good as I think Annals of Time is, it's a hard horse to really endorse. And Ya Primo, I guess, I mean, maybe that was a prep, the first start in the States. And that was just I said it once, but it was a weird race where the closers didn't have much of a chance, and it was a blanket finish. And maybe a horse that I'm never really behind because he just doesn't win a lot, but maybe Sadler's Joy, second off the layoff, can at 9-2 can offer a little bit of value because, like I just said, there really wasn't a setup for him in that last race, and he did run on late. And obviously the Breeders' Cup turf behind Enable and Magical, very acceptable. Maybe you could make a case for Sadler's Joy being, or maybe as a kind of an exacta key first or second, but I don't have a real strong opinion in here. I don't want to spread too deep because I think it's very feasible that one of the Chads win, but I'd be lying if I said I had a real strong opinion.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't tell anyone not to include Ya Primo or Annals of Time, but I won't have them as my top selections in here. I think you hit the horse that I like most, and I'm kind of pretty evenly split between Channel Cat and Sadler's Joy. I think the two of them are both going to run really well in here. Channel Cat, who was good last time out, but you mentioned Sadler's Joy. At first glance, you look, he's 0 for his last 8, but he did run really well in the Breeders' Cup. Last time out, he was pushed back at the start. No big deal. He's a deep closer. He's always way out of it. He's 10th. He's 10 off. He stays inside. And as he's saving ground, he moves right up. He is right in contention, at the top of the lane. He has a big shot. He's right there within a couple lengths, but he has absolutely nowhere to go. He gets a small seam late, and then he starts to move, but then that seam closed up. And you could tell he was moving up the rail, and he passed a lot of horses, and then those same horses came back and ended up out finishing him and passing him up along the outside. It's like most turf racing, right, Scott? Like if he gets a trip, he's going to be tough to hold off. But that's the problem when you play a stone cold closer like this. You're going to be at the benefit of the race shape, and a lot of times you're going to get stuck in a bad spot. You're going to get a little bit wide. You're going to have to maneuver and weave in and out. But I think we both kind of feel the same way on this race. Wouldn't be shocked if it's the Chads, but like if you're playing the rolling exotics, you're going to have to take a stand in one of these races where you just say, you know what, this is the race where maybe I'm going to try to beat the short price horses. This might be that race for me, depending on the way the rest of it shapes up. I guess I'd prefer, let's say this, of the two Chads, you have Primo and Annals of Time. Which do you prefer?
I think I prefer the talent of Annals of Time, even though I expect him to be the favorite. I think that that's been the plan since the beginning of the middle of the year when he brought him back at Belmont. I think he's had his eye on this race, knowing Bricks and Mortar and Robert Bruce would be in the Arlington Million, and maybe or the 4-star Dave. But yeah, Annals of Time, I'd have to say. I was actually looking forward to betting Annals of Time again when he moved up in the stakes company, but I was kind of hopeful that it would be with some of the other top tier Chads.
So he'd be a price. You could play him. You could play him at 3-1 or 4-1. He'll be 8-5. Most likely in this spot.
Right.
So.
And one thing just to mention about Sadler's Joy before we move on, I think it might be important. You talked about navigating through a big field. This is a 9-horse field, but I suspect maybe Tiz Morning's going to try to wing it on the lead and maybe gain a little separation with Channel Cat sitting second. He's faced a lot of 12, 13-horse fields, Sadler's Joy. Maybe a little bit of a smaller field with a little bit of separation will allow Jose Lezcano to avoid it. And maybe Lezcano will put a little more speed into him. I don't know if that's possible with this horse, but with Castellano and Le Peru as riders, he's a little more aggressive. Maybe he'll get him into a little bit of a closer spot.
And then when you say a little more speed, we're not talking like he's on the front end, but maybe he's just not dead last. Maybe he's got 3 horses beat down the back stretch, and he doesn't have to worry about a couple extra horses to get in and out of. That's all it takes sometimes. It's just getting into a little bit better position when you unleash that rally. So, yeah, let's give a look to Sadler's Joy there in the 10th as we get to the feature, the Grade 1, the Run Happy Travers, 1.25 miles. And I guess we'll start with there are, I guess, a big 2. I'm looking at this race at least, like the 2 horses that I think most people are going to start with and start their analysis with Code of Honor and with Tacitus. So now Tacitus, who's 5-2, he was your Wood Memorial winner. He was put up to third in the Derby. But since that Wood Memorial, he's had 3 races where he's had some issues, maybe some things that he caused, maybe some other stuff. Now he adds the blinkers. Are the blinkers going to be enough to get an obviously very talented horse focused enough to win this race, Scott?
That's a good question. And 5-2, a little short for me, I think, in this field to have to navigate it. But as Travis Stone said to me on my podcast earlier today, Jose Ortiz has had a great run riding, and if he could have two races back maybe all year, it might be the last 2 rides on Tacitus. The Belmont being extremely wide with the golden rail, and then last time in the Jim Dandy being moving into the inside after the poor start. Instead of being on the outside which was more advantageous at that point. It's just hard for me with a horse that struggled to win races for the most part and is yet to win a Grade 1 to really go all in on this horse. Mm-hmm. But that being said, he's the deserving favorite, and it'll take a lot to get him out of this try. Probably another poor voyage.
Let's kind of start from, I guess, the inside, and we'll hit some of the contenders best that we can. Owendale, who's been a pretty nice late developing 3-year-old. That Lexington win was awesome. He came back and he was more than anything. If you just put a line through the Risen Star, his form looks really good overall. He hasn't been, that bad, and he won the Ohio Derby. That's obviously not this quite caliber. Horse that he beat, Math Wizard, came back and was crushed by Mr. Money in his next 2 starts. Owendale from the rail tried to save ground and make one late rally. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, anytime Brad Cox puts a horse into a Grade One like this, a big race, I respect it. I always respected Brad, but being here in Kentucky and in Louisville, where Brad is now, I really gained a lot of respect. This guy's one of the top trainers in the country, and he knows where to place his horses. The rail to me doesn't bother me unless it's dead in terms of that. But in terms of the post, a horse that has very little speed, Florent Giroux should be able to take back and make one run. I'm not worried about the 1.25 miles. If he gets enough pace, he's definitely a factor here. 6-1, pretty fair. Might even get a little drift there, Gino.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to talk you off Owendale. I think you're right. He could save all the ground. I think the rail's a good spot for him in a race like this to just save ground and then make that late run. Code of Honor, interesting horse who's been highly regarded throughout his whole career. He won his career debut. I guess he's kind of been his own worst enemy because he's had a couple of physical issues, sometimes leading up to some big races that have caused him to miss races or miss a prep here and there. But when he's good, he's very good. I mean, he was really nice in the Derby up the inside, and he might have been impeded a little bit when Maximum Security kind of went back and forth. And then last time out in the Dwyer, that was a field that I think he's a lot better than at a mile, but he did what he was supposed to do. He sat behind, he waited, and then as soon as he got a little seam, he angled out in between, and he exploded.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this horse from a talent perspective. I have been from day one, but I think I'm going to be against him in this spot for one main reason. I just don't think he's a true 1.25 mile horse, maybe not even 1.125 miles. You could look to races on the form. The Derby, he ran third, even got moved up to second. But, man, shouldn't he have won the Derby? I know you mentioned a little bit of trouble, but shouldn't he have won?
But he got a great trip. And I think
exactly.
he got the move on the inside. And now if Maximum Security was zigging and zagging, but the thing is in the Derby, that's the kind of trip that you want. Like, there's a lot of horses who are going wide, getting shuffled back, getting bumped around, moving around. Like, you want to be able to save and move through. I thought he was going to win the Derby.
Exactly. That's what I mean.
He did.
He definitely. So I've always wondered if he was 1.25 miles. And then the other race that he won, the only race that he won at 2 turns is the Fountain of Youth, and he ran awesome, and I even liked him that day. But he got the setup. They went 22 and 4, 45 and 3, and the whole field stopped basically. Vacoma got third and was like barely walking to the wire that race. They went so fast up front. But so I'm going to take as like you mentioned, probably the second of the most prominent horses in here, 4-1 on the line. Don't expect him to get bet down from 4-1. And I have a lot of respect for Shug for placing his horses in the proper spots, but this is a chance they have to take with this horse. So I'm not convinced that they think for sure that he's 1.25 mile horse. Like the Derby, you got to run in this spot if you're Shug. So I think they're taking the chance that the 1.25 miles works out and the talent overcomes that. But I think he's a horse worth taking a chance against in this spot.
The Curlin had a couple horses that are going to be in here. Highest Honors won that race. Endorsed was second. Looking at Bikinis was third. Looking at Bikinis was actually the favorite that day, and he got a pretty easy lead. But when Highest Honors and Endorsed, they came rolling together, they kind of went right by Looking at Bikinis. He didn't really have much of a challenge. He started to kind of grind away late, and he came back into third. But do you like any one of the three that come out of the Curlin?
Well, I do think the Curlin was a really good race, and I have respect for all three horses. Keep in mind that day on July 26th at Saratoga that the inside was completely dead, and you really wanted to be a horse coming from off the pace, rallying in the middle of the racetrack. So
where both so you'll give a little bit of an upgrade to Looking at Bikinis with that.
I do. Yeah, and he was all the hype going into that race. I mean, this was Chad's best, this horse was the greatest thing since sliced bread, everyone thought, and he was bet down to even money against a pretty solid group. And he raced against it, and it was in the off-going. Now, whether that was part of it, it's hard to say because he broke his maiden by 5 3/4 lengths in the slop at Belmont last year. But I'm willing to overlook that race. And just on paper, there's not a ton of speed in here either. So I think he's going to be on the lead. And as much as Chad wanted to win the Curlin, I know there's only one race he wants to win, maybe more than the Kentucky Derby, and that's the Travers Stakes, and that's what this is in his own backyard. So I'd have to think that ultimately the goal was to get this horse ready for the Travers and not necessarily win the Curlin. You have the other excuses. I give him a big look in here, especially from a verticals perspective. And then Endorsed is a horse that I had at the top of my Kentucky Derby list when I had first had to submit one early in the year on KentuckyDerby.com. And really was impressed with the way this horse beat ahead of plan. It was a well-meant Chad horse last year at Saratoga. Ran well in the Curlin, broke my heart as my play of the day that day at 8-1, running second to highest honors. The mile and a quarter, though, is a question mark. I'm not sure, and he was over the right part of the racetrack that day, as was highest honors. So all three of them, I think, are legitimately talented horses. The Curlin was not that much of a downgrade from the Jim Dandy.
No.
Thought it was a good race. So all of them offer significant value. I give the look to looking at bikinis of the three, though.
Scott will be looking at bikinis this weekend. And we look at like, Laughing Fox and Everfast. They're a couple bombs who will be late runners. I guess they kind of are like Owendale too, who are going to try to just take back and make one late rally. You know, if you're looking for bottom of exotics horses, I do think Laughing Fox could sneak into maybe the 2, 3, 4 spots the way this race unfolds, because I think he is a distance horse. And I do think last time in the Jim Dandy, it was a small field. They were going slow. He tried to get up a little bit closer than normal. He just wants to take all the way back and then make one late run. So I'm not really high on Everfast, but I'm not, I guess, high on Laughing Fox. But if you're looking for a bust out long shot to use on some of the bottom of your exotics, if you love Tacitus and you're going to play some price horses under, don't leave Laughing Fox out. Everfast, do you have any thoughts on either of those two bombs, Everfast, Laughing Fox?
Yeah, I thought Everfast had got one of the best rides in the Triple Crown in a long time from Joel Rosario in the Preakness to get second that day. Yeah. Just getting the best of Owendale, who went very, very wide, was definitely third best that day, but got second. I'm not really a big fan of Everfast, but Laughing Fox, the one thing I'll say, what I see on the racetrack has never really impressed me, but the fact that Steve keeps bringing this horse back in these big races makes me think he still thinks there's a little more to this son of Union Rags than what we've seen. The 0-2 record at Saratoga, a little discouraging, but one of those was the 4th place finish last time. And when he was, it wasn't really a setup for him. He would, like you said, he would need the right setup. He would need an absolute collapse to be a threat to win this race, if that. But I could see using him in the 3rd and 4th slots.
We talked Tacitus, who's going to add the blinkers and hope that can give him a little bit more focus today. And then you get to Mucho Gusto, who's been one of Baffert's, B-tier horses, but people forget about this guy. I mean, he's a really nice animal. He is a 4-time graded stakes winner now. He has shown the ability in the last couple of starts. He's matured a little bit. He can sit off the pace if need be. He has that tactical speed. The main concern I have with him, even though he's a 3-year-old son of Mucho Macho Man, I just don't know if he's going to really want the mile and a quarter. But I feel like he's going to fight and give you a good run for your money, and he'll be involved in the pace in some way.
Yeah, so let's positives and negatives on this horse. The number one positive to me is that Bob Baffert decided pretty recently to, he lost Game Winner, and he decided this horse worked so well at Del Mar that he had to ship him cross country for the biggest 3-year-old race of the summer. This guy Baffert is pretty good at the 3-year-old game with these
won
horses.
1 or 2.
So, yeah. And then the Haskell was extremely encouraging. Was a little wide throughout, got out of the gate a little slower than Joe Talamo probably wanted, and really fought maximum security to the wire and didn't stop running. And like you, one of my biggest concerns about this horse is the ability to get the mile and a quarter. But maybe he's just a new horse, and that and has continued to get better, and that maybe the mile and a quarter is within scope. And if he gets out of the gate, he could sit the dream trip here. Look at Matt Bikini's probably on the lead, and I assume from the outside, Rad Ortiz Jr. is going to have to send tax, who we haven't talked about yet. I think Mucho Gusto should be sitting right in the pocket there in some way, and should get first run on the late runners, including Tacitus and Code of Honor. I doubt we get 6-1 on a Bob Baffert horse that's got that many ones on his resume. But this is a major player in here, and you have to respect the fact that Baffert's shipping him across country.
Yeah, I agree. I'll have a tough time leaving him off my ticket just because he battles, as you mentioned, in a small field too. In the Haskell, you're hooked 4 wide. throughout, which is good. You try to keep him in the clear. You didn't want him to have to start and stop, but you did give up a lot of ground to Maximum Security that day. And then when you try to battle him, he had a little more left in the tank. So mucho gusto, major player, and he should be in the mix in this race all the way throughout. Chest Chief, who I think another Stewart with that running style, right? With the late
we had him
style.
And we had him on our show, Inside Churchill Downs, Darren Rogers, Kevin Kirstein, and I last weekend on Friday because he had Seeking the Soul in the Pacific Classic. But we did throw in a question about Chest Chief, and he didn't really give the horse a huge push. But I just love Dallas because he puts his horses out there in the big races, and these races would come up so much more stronger and less compact if everybody was Dallas Stewart.
100%. And a lot of his horses too is what I like, and it's always funny to see how trainers have, like anything, I guess, their strengths and their weaknesses, and it seems like his horses are always going to finish, and that's what's great in races is like sometimes they'll get outrun, and in like sprint races or in races where there's not a lot of speed early on, they'll get beat 15 to 20 lengths sometimes, and so their form will look a little muddled up. And then when they get the opportunity to run and when they get a trip, those horses always come closing. He's got his horses fit. They always come running. And I was actually really surprised that Seeking the Soul didn't run well in the Pacific Classic because he's a really nice horse. I thought he was just kind of a standout against that group. Maybe he didn't like the track or the chip or whatever. It was kind of a race that was too bad to believe. But I always like giving the Dallas Stewart horses a second look, man. You're always going to get a good run for your money there with Dallas. 3 outside horses. Let's finish out this field. We'll go to Scars Are Cool. Hey, you know what? This is another one, Scott, who I don't think he's good enough, maybe, but he's peaking at the right time. He just won a maiden race, and he's a horse who I think can run all day. I'm not worried about the 1.25 miles with him. He sat off. He was in between. He angled up. It was a pretty nice sustained rally. He had to go like 6-7 wide, and he kept going. He's one that I kind of have in that Laughing Fox. Like, I probably wouldn't put him to win, but I probably won't be playing trifectas without a horse like this in the bottom at least.
Well, I have a cool story about this horse. That May 12th day at Churchill, I happened to be doing the simulcast show from the paddock, and this horse, they had to change his shoe. He was freaking out, and this horse opened up at like 6-5 in his maiden debut on May 12th. Over a wet, fast course. He ended up drifting up to 5-1 if you look at the price because he just acted like such a clown in the paddock. And then he ran a huge race.
From the rail.
So I'm sitting,
yeah,
and I'm sitting here, okay, stable alert city here, waiting for this horse to come back. Comes back on June 16th and had kind of a troubled trip at even money. And then he came back at Saratoga last time to beat a very suspect group, I'll admit. I'm shocked to see him in the Travers, to be honest. It's way over his head, in my opinion. I think the horse has talent. He was a great looker. Not that that's my expertise looking at horses, but he was just one of those horses that really stood out, the son of Malibu Moon. That being said, I mean, he's tough. He's
it's
pretty
gonna be
overmatched. Yeah.
And it's funny, he was in that debut race he talked about against 12th Labor. The other's Dallas Stewart, and then Rise the Guy, who's actually not a bad horse.
Good turf horse. Yeah,
he went in the Secretariat last week.
Yep.
He was 2 for 2 on the grass, and then he faced a tough group. He was against Grade 1. So he comes out of okay races. I agree with you. I think he's a little overmatched, but hey, you know what? If you're looking for bombs on the bottom of your exotics, I'm not going to talk you off of 30-1 who should be able to get the distance when some of these – I mean, we went through maybe at least half the field and we're wondering if they can get the distance. At least that won't be – I don't think that'll be the problem for Scars Are Cool, who should be running in the end. And then we talked about Endorsed, who was a good second. As you mentioned, I thought it was a pretty strong running of the Curlin this year also. What do we do with Tax on the outside? To me – he this year has been one of the most, I guess, intriguing horses to handicap. I just never know what to do with him. I never know what to do with Tax. What do we do with him in this spot?
I got to tell you, I still haven't gotten over the fact that Claiborne and Ben Colebrook were willing to put this horse in for $30K on debut. Yeah, Son of Arch, and what are they like? What were they so quick? And that's stubbornness by me, but that's still something I remember. And it's funny, I'm over it with Maximum Security.
This maiden Claimer's not going to win the Belmont. This maiden Claimer's not going to win the damn Dandy. You know what I mean? Yeah, like this.
Yeah, but from the 12 hole going a mile and a quarter, I think he's going to have to beat me. I think he could work out a good trip if he can get out of the gate and Irod can get him a good spot. But have never been convinced that this horse is at this level. And you heard all the stories going into the Jim Dandy that Danny Gargan had him better than ever, and it sure seems so. He ran won the biggest race of his career. I'm going to let him beat me, but I don't know if I have tremendously great reasons other than a little bit of stubbornness in the outside post and just a little bit of a preference for horses that might either be a better price or have a stronger resume.
Yeah, the concern is he ran really well last time out, and I liked that he broke well. He takes the lead, but then he just sat chilly when War of Will moved early on. He didn't try to battle with him, or he didn't try to get aggressive. He just let him take the lead. He just let him go, sat second, and then he moved again, and he did hold off Global Campaign. But that's the only thing. He's holding off Global Campaign, who is really not a distance horse, right? Who's not a horse that we would think would be a mile and a quarter horse, especially coming from off the pace. So to me, I think I'm with you. I'm worried that from the outside, if he's not able to cross over, I feel like he's going to get floated wide, and it might not be a good trip for him where he's just kind of wide all the way around and losing ground. So I'll be a little against Tax in here. And so when we look back at the field throughout, who are a couple of, or how is the approach going to be for you in this race from a wagering standpoint?
I think at this point, Mucho Gusto and looking at bikinis are based, if you combine, talent and value, which is what you should always do when analyzing and betting on a race. Those are the two that intrigue me most. I don't think there's a ton of speed in here. Ideally, I'm hoping that Tax doesn't press looking at bikinis. That might be inevitable if Irod Ortiz Jr. shoves out of the gate, which he probably has to, but I'm hoping they can kind of sit 1, 2, and Mucho Gusto can sit 3. I'm going to still include Endorsed, even though I'm concerned about the distance because of the price and because of the past love and the fact that Joel Rosario, I think he fits the horse well. But I think Mucho Gusto and looking at bikinis will be my two key horses. I'm not against Tacitus and I'm not against Owendale, but I will fade Code of Honor out of the top 3.
Yeah, I'm probably going to give Mucho Gusto, I guess, the slight bid. I won't be betting, I think, anyone to win in here, but I'll more likely be using a few in the exotics, and Mucho Gusto is one of them. I'll probably try to sneak looking at bikinis and maybe even highest honors because I do like that Curlin race, and I think both of them have a little bit of a shot back here. And then maybe if I want to go a little bit deeper, the one horse for me that I just don't know what to do with is Code of Honor. I'm debating back and forth, and I kind of feel the way that you did, like he's a miler. I think that's where his best is, so he might be more of an under type. But I do like Mucho Gusto, and I think the real approach for me in this race might be to try to get a couple of those long shots that I like in the bottom of the exotics. Maybe you can play some
always
some tries.
A good move.
Yeah, some tries and try to get Laughing Fox. Scars are cool in the bottom, and maybe if we can get one of those horses with a looking at bikinis and a Mucho Gusto, like 2 of those 3 in the try, even with a Code of Honor or Tacitus, we're still probably looking at a good payout.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting. I'm just looking at it. Joe Talamo winning the Travers, that would have to be the biggest win of his life, right? I mean,
yeah.
He had
some good ones at Hollywood. He had right when he came out.
He was the best as an apprentice.
He was on fire, and he was winning races. I think he had a couple Grade 1 wins on a big card at Hollywood that I can remember.
Carla Gaines' horse, maybe?
Yeah. He won
Warren Williamson, Carla Gaines' horse. What was that horse
called?
The Showbiz Yes.
I think so. And he, to be honest, he's had a little bit of a lull for the last few years, but it started to pick back up now. And if you just look at it,
business, right?
Exactly,
yeah.
You get the bat for business. You're working those horses out in the morning. You're just getting on some better horses. That's an issue that a lot of young riders have when they lose their bug. It takes them a little while to figure things out, to get the business. And Joe is become a real staple out here. So this would be a huge win. Always rooting for Joe to do well if he can get Mucho Gusto home in the Travers. Scott, I asked you for about 30 to 40 minutes. You gave me over an hour. I appreciate it, my man. Thank you so much. Let the folks out there know. So what's the schedule like for you coming up? I know you do a lot of writing when it comes to these football games. You give out a lot of plays weekly, and you're still going to have the Who Do You Like podcast. Let us know, what are you going to be working on? Where can we find you?
Yeah, this is kind of a once these summer meets end, things segue a little bit. NFL will be a very, very big part of my plate. We'll do the Who Do You Like podcast will be NFL centric every week. That comes out on Thursday morning. I'll also be writing 2 to 3 articles for the Bet America blog. And then I'll be up on the Churchill Down simulcast feed 5 of the 11 days over the September meet, and then hopefully more of the same in November. So it'll be NFL, it'll be Churchill Downs. Of course, I'll be watching other racing and watching a lot of college football and gearing up for college basketball. But an exciting time of year, Gino. A lot going on, and the baseball playoffs to enjoy as well.
Great. Yeah, things are gonna change a little bit on the That's What G Said. I think we're gonna be up most weeks to 3 shows a week when football season starts. So I'm definitely going to be needing your help on some of those weeks, especially like we'll break down the NFL games and we'll go through some of the lines and some fantasy stuff. But when it comes to college, I'm really going to need your help because I watch my Trojans, but they've been bad the last few years. So you know what it's like when the team you root for isn't as good. You're just not quite.
From the sport,
it
right?
does. You're just not quite in it as deep as you would be. So we'll definitely have to get you back again very soon. And I appreciate you giving me all the time, buddy. I know you're a busy man, and I look forward to our conversations as much as I do with anyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. Always fun.
Have a great one. Scott Shapiro. We'll be back in just a minute here on That's What G Said.
A big thanks to Scott Shapiro for the excellent analysis there. As you can tell, Scott really knows his stuff. Great handicapper. Make sure to give him a look and a follow, and his podcast, the Who Do You Like podcast. Give that one a follow and subscribe over there for Scott. I'm going to get into just a little bit of a recap, but before I do, I wanted to mention sponsor of the show, Cindy Carava. Make sure you get to her website, cindycarava.com, or you can send her an email, cindyc.realtor@gmail.com. I've known Cindy for a decade now. She is one of the nicest people you will ever meet. Very genuine. She will help you out anything you need in the field of real estate, buying, selling, leasing. If you're looking to improve your home, she can contact you with all sorts of people. She can help you out if you need pre-approval for a loan. Just anything you need at all in real estate. She's all over the San Gabriel Valley, North San Diego County. If you know the name, sounds familiar. She's the wife of horse racing trainer Jack Carava, who's been in Southern California now for 30 years. CindyCarava.com. Send her an email, cindyc.realtor@gmail.com. So a little recap of some of the horses that I like in the Travers card. So race number 5, it's the Forgo. This is just a tough race for me from a betting standpoint. If you're looking and you're trying to get a little value out of the race, I mean, Mitoli, I feel like he's going to bounce back and he's going to run well in here. But if Ferenzi Fire is 7-2 or 4-1, he's really the only horse I look at and I think you can play because he again looks like he should get the trip. I'm willing to excuse that last start, and if you can forgive the Vanderbilt start, then the Met really wasn't that bad. Let's give Ferenzi Fire the nod just at a price, but he has to be at 4-1. If he gets bet any lower than that, we can't play him, and I probably won't really be playing him much to win. The big price in the race, that is he good enough to win? No, but Airstrike can maybe complete some of your exotics. Airstrike is coming out of some pretty decent races, and if they go quick up front, he will make a late run. So Airstrike maybe in the bottom of some exotics if you're trying to spice things up, but Mitoli should, with the outside draw of promises fulfilled, he should be able to kind of press like we've seen him do a few times. So the 6th race is the Ballerina, and in this spot, I like the outside horse, Dawn the Destroyer. And if Dawn the Destroyer is over 10-1, I think we put a few bucks on her to win. We'll try to see how the racetrack's playing early throughout the card because Dawn the Destroyer she's absolutely going to need a race to fall apart. So if horses are not coming from off the pace early in the day and it looks like it's just a track that you have to be close to or on the lead, then maybe we downgrade her a little bit and more use her underneath. But with Minute to Stardom, with Mia Mischief, with Separation of Powers, with Come Dancing, I think there's going to be a lot of speed. Pacific Gale's not slow. So the 2 horses I'll use in all of the exotics are the 4 and the 7. Dawn the Destroyer will hook up separation of powers with her in most of the exotics. And, after that, maybe Mia Mischief can just press and sit a little bit off. But I'm against Come Dancing in here. I think she's drawn to the inside of all the other speed. If she's big enough, and she has a big enough effort to beat this field, then if she does it at a short price, I'm okay with her beating me. The 7th, I'm gonna have a ticket where I have Chancelot tossed in a pick 4 or some rolling exotics or late pick 5 and some rolling exotics, because I do think there are some chances where something goes wrong for this horse from the rail, and in a big field where there are some legitimate other horses that can be closing ground, if he doesn't get the separation and things don't go all great for him, then maybe the rest of the field, who should be huge prices based on the figures that Chancelot has recently run. So I'm not saying he's not going to win the race, but I'm saying there's going to, or he won't be in the mix, but I'm going to play at least one ticket where I toss him and maybe use horses like the 3 12th Labor in the bottom of some exotics. I think Baracho is a legitimate win contender. Like Nitrous has a shot. Mind Control can bounce back. Roayton, I like quite a bit in here. And Hog Creek Hustle maybe more for the bottom. But I'll try to play one exotic where we toss Chancelot completely out. And then maybe I'll if he's in the pick 5 here, it's tough because it could very easily chalk out, as you see when you continue to go through the races. And it does happen a lot, as Scott mentioned. It does happen a lot on the these big days. So I guess we'll take a little bit more of a wait and see approach in here, but we'll take a little shot against the 1 to 2 shot Chancelot in some of your exotics. The 8th race is where I do like Secret Message, just coming out of a much tougher race. And she seems like a nice grade 2 type horse. I think this is a really good spot for her. She recently defeated another one of the top contenders in here. And the only real concern is that there's not a ton of speed. A couple pace players. But she should be fine. I think she should be fine and very well spotted in here. So Secret Message is a horse that I'll probably just single in any late exotics and probably not play a whole ton in that race. So see what I mean? When you go, if it's Chancelot and then if it's Secret Message, and then you get to the 9th race and you have Midnight Bisou and Elate, who are going to both take a ton of money. And Elate's better at the distance. A lot of it will depend on price if I was playing this race individually. I'm not willing to dismiss Midnight Bisou. And as Scott and I discussed, we talked about how it's not smart to double up with Midnight Bisou and Elate. So just from an exotic standpoint, I think the horse that does have a shot and to include some places as Golden Award, I really like the way that she's improving. And if Elate's taking a lot of money, then maybe Midnight Bisou is the right way to go. It just really depends on if either one of these take more money than the other. But, you're talking about two very, very nice and, probably the top 2 of the older filly in mare division in Midnight Bisou and Elate. I'm a Bisou fan, though. I think she's matured and grown up a little bit. Even though this isn't her preferred distance, it's just, it's going to come down to the price. It's just, that's that. When it's a 2 that are evenly matched like this, you always have to let price determine. In the 10th, I like Channel Cat. I thought that was a really good effort on the lead, and he was able to just hold them all off there. Sadler's Joy would probably be, I guess, the slight top selection. It would be between those two. And I'm a little cold on Channel Maker. Annals of Time, I'm okay with. Ya Primo, I'm okay. I could go either way with. But the 2 that I like most in here, Channel Cat and Sadler's Joy. And those will be the 2 that I use in most of the exotics in this race and in the top spots. And we'll try to maybe beat the Chad Browns in this one. And in the Travers, this was a tough race. I like Mucho Gusto. The 1.25 miles just worries me a little bit, but I think he's going to be right there, and I think he's going to give you a really good run. Looking at Bikini, should be up in the mix early on. The 2 price horses that I like, I think you should use in your exotics, and I'll try to hook them up because I think this could be a good race to try to get a nice try or a super home. Don't just completely dismiss Laughing Fox and Scars Are Cool. So the number 4 and the 10, you can use them both in your tries and your supers. They have a legitimate shot to hit the bottom of the exotics, and they could really spice things up. So, as you can see, really quality racing. In a couple spots where we can take some shots against the chalk, but at the highest levels, a lot of time the form does hold up. So there's some thoughts on Saratoga in the Travers. I hope you all have a great one. Best of luck. I didn't even mention really Code of Honor and Taxes, but they're obviously, logical contenders. We talked about them in the interview with Scott more. I'm not like in love with either one of them. If they won, it wouldn't surprise me, but I'm more interested in trying to get one of these price horses into the mix. And in those exotics, Tacitus and Code of Honor will be in there because I have some bombs. So it'll likely be, a couple of logicals with Mucho Gusto, Code of Honor, Tacitus, and then I can include a couple of the prices that I mentioned with Laughing Fox, Scars, and I'll probably get Looking at Bikinis in the mix in there too. Highest Honors wasn't bad, really no knocks on him. So the key to this race for me will be tries, supers instead of playing this, because normally I'm more of an individual win type, but I really don't have as many strong win plays. Follow along on social media though, as sometimes when as the races are going and prices change and there's sometimes a track bias or a weather issue, or there's so many variables that happen throughout a card. Sometimes your opinion has to change, and always have to be ready to call an audible if need be. Let's close things out. A little Beverly Hills 90210 recap. So this was the 3rd episode. And it opened up with another one of the flashbacks that we see where Brandon and Kelly are in the peach pit, and Kelly's coming on to him. And then Brandon is the owner of the peach pit, and he's closing up, and she walks in, and they start going at it, and it's a black and white scene. And then all of a sudden we wake up, and it was just Jason's dream. And Jason Priestley tells his wife when she comes home that he knows the baby is not his because the doctors have recently told him that he cannot have kids. She admits to him that she cheated on him. It was an accident. It's an accidental, unprotected sex. She said it was one too many kamikazes, which he kind of makes a mental note later, that word kamikaze. Next up, Gabby and her husband, they're talking about Gabby's new feelings for women. She recently told him that she has kind of had some feelings. This is a side of herself that she's wanted to deal with and explore, because these have been kind of feelings that have been bottled up. Then Tori is with her husband, and the husband's worried about having to take care of the kids and be the stay-at-home dad while she's gone now, because she's going to be working. She's going to be starting the reboot. She goes to meet with Fox, and she talks to Emily Valentine, Christine, who she tells about everyone's demands. Christine's holding Tori responsible for the issues, and Shannon better be on board. So now, the group, they're doing a script together, and they're reading over the pilot script, and they don't really seem to love the writing. It seems pretty bad, and Ian's hungover. He starts flirting with one of the assistant writers. She gets really offended instantly, and that's something to keep on the back burner. And then Jason notices some things in the writing. It's the guy's story of Jason, and he sees the word kamikaze in there, and it triggers him. He knows the writer comes over. Jason gets into it with him. He starts to, come at him. This is a pretty funny part. He says, they say, use your words, Jay. And he says, this guy slept with my wife and got her pregnant. And Brian says, good words, Jay. The writer, Carlisle, comes over and tells Jason that since he wasn't satisfying his wife, Carlisle had to step in. Ian holds Jason back and then punches the writer. That's great. That's like an Entourage Johnny Drama moment. Love that. Ian always there for Brando. Someone had to do something about that guy's writing as he knocked him out. Tori wants to get them to group therapy, so they go, and guess who is the therapist? Carol Potter, Mrs. Walsh. Hey! She tells them to call her mom. Kidding. But the years of 90210 have prepped her to become a therapist. They've given her lots of observing psychopathology. So the group all starts to tell her about how they've kind of had this weird stalker that sent them the dolls. Really, it's just kind of Jenny who is worried about this. Ian, Jason, and Gabby, they don't really seem concerned. Brian doesn't really seem concerned. But it's Jenny Kelly who wants a bodyguard. And so they have a group conversation with Carol. And then it gets out that Jenny and Jason slept together. So now everybody knows that. Tori gets mad because she didn't know. She was upset that Jenny didn't tell her. And then Jenny gets upset now that everybody walks out, that everybody knows, and she's uncomfortable. She walks out, and no one is really happy. They all leave. Carol wants a cameo, though. Brian is looking for his assistant, and he interviews that weird kid, Zach, who we've seen kind of stalking him for the assistant job. Shay, Brian's wife, does not like him. The kid is playing them, though. We've known this. We've been watching. Jenny, she thinks she's getting stalked, but it's actually the new bodyguard at her house. She was assigned this bodyguard by the network because of the dolls and she's scared. He's named Wyatt. She doesn't realize. She kind of almost attacks him before he lets her know. Brian then tells his wife, Shay, that he wants to hire the kid, Zach. Shay thinks there's something up with Zach. You can tell she thinks there's something off. She even says as much. They joke, and Brian ends up hiring him. Gabby's talking with Emily Valentine about the storylines and the ones that she wants with Andrea. And right away, Emily notices that this is about Gabby, and this is more about what Gabby is feeling. So she says, why don't you go do some method acting and try out these feelings to get yourself ready to play Andrea going through these emotions. Ian then apologizes to the assistant writer, Anna, for making her uncomfortable with the comments. He really didn't say much. He just complimented her on her eyes. And that's kind of what he's dealing with, is he's now not with his wife anymore, and he's realizing that it's a very sensitive culture in a time in the society that we live in, and he's been always a little bit of a horn dog, right? But this time he just said he thought she had nice eyes, and he was a little hungover, so maybe it came off a little wrong. But he apologizes to her, and he says the world's changed since he's been married, and he doesn't really know how to act with women anymore. And Tori's husband now, as Tori's spending more time with the cast, he's becoming really jealous of the relationship with Tori and Brian. And Tori, they're on a Skype, and the husband sees Brian kind of asking questions and asking, hey, Tori, how's my butt look? And he's definitely worried. Tori and Jason, they sit down with the writer. They're with Carlisle. They're trying to work it all out. And Jason tells Tori, no, it's one or the other. It's me or him. I'm not going to work with this guy. He won't work unless they fire the writer that got his wife pregnant. I mean, that seems fair, right? Tori is dealing with producer drama. She is getting it on all sides from everyone. Everyone has their demands. Everyone has what they want. and she still doesn't have Shannon in the mix yet. And now her husband's getting a little jealous, so he asks for no love scenes between her and Brian because he's nervous, so he doesn't want anything between Donna and David. Tori goes to talk to Jason, try to smooth things over again, and Jason said, I called the network and I told them the ultimatum, and so now Tori has to talk with Emily, who's in charge of the show, Emily Valentine. So Shay, now since Brian is working, Shay, his famous rich wife, she's got to be at home with the kids a little bit more, and she's not quite used to it. So one of the kids ends up running off, and then it's Zach, the assistant, creepy assistant, who's bringing him back in. She's just not quite used to taking care of the kids. Tori and Jenny, they hang out, and Tori's still a little bit upset that Jenny didn't tell her about the incident with Jason, and Jenny mentions that she's falling for Jason, which we all know. We all know she wants some Priestley. Who doesn't want some Priestley? Emily is upset with Tori because they have to fire the writer now, so Carlisle's going to be out. So she tells Tori to fire him, to go get Shannon, and to figure some things out. Emily V, a.k.a. Christine. I've been saying Emily because we probably don't know her name as well as some of the others, right? Ian going with Tori to fire Carlisle. So 2 weeks out, they have to fire the head writer, and they still have no Brenda, a.k.a. Shannon. Tori fires him, but he doesn't really seem upset, so this guy is up to something. We already know he's a bad dude. Zach ends up taking the blame for Shay and Brian's little girl who got out, and he's trying to win over Shay. He's trying to win over Brian. He's just playing him. Creepy kid. Jenny ends up going to see Jason at Gabby's, and she tells him that he should stay with his wife, and he should tell his wife about their affair. She's obviously in love with him, and she just doesn't want it to go any farther, so she's trying to push him away. Brian, who's going to fire Zach, but Shay lets him know that she was the one that actually let Bryce out, so Brian, I think this kind of wins him over, and he ends up talking to Zach about it a little while later, and he gives him a key to their house. So this really scored major points with them. Ian is heavily drinking. He's not coping well with the divorce and the women problems now, and he doesn't understand the world and how things have changed. He can't compliment. He can't flatter women. He's getting drunk, and he picks up. You know, when you're at the bar, like in the bar where the bartenders mix the drinks, there's the mat underneath where all the spilled alcohol kind of gets on this little mat. He picks up the mat from the bar and he squeezes all the alcohol from it into a glass. It was so gross, but it was hilarious. Jenny, she's having these interactions now with her new bodyguard, with Wyatt. She's starting to like him. There's a little bit of weird flirtation. They keep running into each other when Jenny hears something. So there's a lot of these figures now who are a little bit creepy, and we don't know if they're good or bad, right? And we're seeing that with Zach. We're seeing that with the writer. We're seeing this with even Emily. And the assistant writer seems like there's something a little more there. There are, it's getting a little better, right? There are a lot of different things happening now, and you may not like all of the storylines, or maybe not like everything that's going on with everyone, but there's a lot happening at least. So it's not, it's moving, and they've introduced new people and new storylines, which I think is a big positive. So Jason goes back to talk to his wife, and he tells her about Jenny, and he tells her that he ended up having an incident, an affair with Jenny when they were in Vegas. Brian gives Zach a key to their house. He scored some points. He scored those points. And Tori goes to Peru. She has to find Brenda Shannon. She's climbing the hills through the wilderness in the middle of nowhere. She ends up fighting Shannon in a shack and with some sort of shaman, Tori is begging Shannon for her help, and she agrees. She's going to come back and help. Christine, being very flirty with Gabby, matches with Gabby on a dating app. So it looks like there's a future with them. And the new head writer was the girl that Ian had that weird, awkward interaction with. Immediately, she tells Brian that she wants a hot and heavy love story with Donna and David. And now Shannon is back, and they have their photo shoot. So the next few episodes, how is everybody going to deal with Shannon? Seems like Shannon is not quite right to be back in this world of Hollywood. What's going to happen with Emily and Gabby? What's up with Tori and Brian and the love story they're going to have on screen? We know that Jason and Jenny are going to continue to have some flirtations there. The weird writer, the weird stalker, Zach. That is BH90210. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in to another episode of That's What G Said podcast. Hope you all enjoyed it. Remember, there's some fantasy football on the most recent one. If you're into fantasy football before you go and draft, take a look. We cover running backs and quarterbacks.